Let's talk about desiloing, the lack of tribalism, and just getting along better.
This episode of the Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. And as always, the thoughts and opinions expressed within this episode are those of your hosts and not necessarily the Herzog Foundation. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
And I'm Mark Zockoll. This morning, we're going to be offering you this is the earliest we've ever done a podcast. It's also the latest.
I was going to say, it's still 6 a.m.
It's a lot of different things. It's the earliest on Saturday, August 23rd. It's the latest. I mean, we're technically into Saturday morning, but we started this journey on a Friday. So if there's a wacky energy about us tonight, if something's not quite right, it could well be because the sleepy time she comes. It's
already past. It's already past this point.
It's past us. At this point, might as well just stay up. Actually, I don't do that very well. I don't know about you, our listeners. I don't stay up well. I don't necessarily need to make up sleep that I lose still yet at this point in my life. But generally speaking, I would rather get up very early than stay up very late.
Yeah. Nothing a good 20-minute nap won't fix.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Boom.
Nap time. No coffee, just the nap. Give me a nap. Before we keep going with this description of how we operate in odd times, let's go ahead and hear from our partners at the Herzog Foundation, as well as GradeLink Student Information Systems.
This episode is brought to you by our partners at the Herzog Foundation, whose mission aligns beautifully with ours to advance and support Christ-centered education. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze excellence in Christian schools, helping more children experience academic rigor, biblical truth, and strong moral character, all in a safe and nurturing environment. Whether through teacher training, principal development, or strategic media efforts, the Herzog Foundation is committed to helping you, the Christian school leader, fulfill your calling with excellence. Their vision is bold but clear, a national renaissance in Christian education that impacts culture for generations. At the Christian Principles Podcast, we're proud to stand with the Herzog Foundation in that mission. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. Together, we're building schools and futures on the rock of Christ. And as always, tell them that the fellas here at the Christian Principles Podcast sent you their way.
You know, as a host, I actually use GradeLink myself, and I can't recommend it enough. It's been a huge help in keeping things organized and making sure our school's administration runs smoothly. So, if you're part of a school that needs a reliable system, head over to cpp.gradelink.com and see what they can do for you.
Coming back online this early morning, that we have been blessed to drink from the fire hydrant, which was the Christian School State Association Summit, as put on by Lydia Quick, the Iowa Association of Christian Schools, and the Herzog Foundation, our dear partner, the Herzog Foundation. And there were pieces of that event that moved us. One of the keys, one of the focus points, a part of accomplishing the mission as the Herzog Foundation sees it, part of what makes them want to operate with groups like the Iowa Association of Christian Schools and others is, as they've referred to it now, the desiloing of Christian education. Now, I'm not going to say I know more than everybody else, more than some of you, our listeners, about the historicity of Christian education in the United States of America. I know more than the average bear.
Okay.
I mean, you do as well.
Yep.
Being products of it, being graduates of it, being in it, having spent our lives in it to this point, professional lives in it. We are not unaware of portions of the history. And so I think it's worth to go over the history that we do know to some extent to offer you insight as to what perhaps you have no idea. Well, I think of Sharon Thorne at Friendship Christian in Germantown, and she speaks often of how it was such a breath of fresh air, a wave of newness when she left her job at the public school for her whole professional life and came to Friendship Christian and began again, and serves as the assistant principal there now. And for her, much of this knowledge does not come to her as easily as it comes to as us or wasn't sought out, wasn't something that and so perhaps Sharon, if you're listening, or others, we have the landmark taking prayer out of schools in the United States of America. We have the resulting Christian school movement, which began in Maryland. It looked a lot like that. It looked like many schools seeing what they knew to be the case, what they expected to be the case, now no longer be the case, and therefore it is time to take our children to train them up in the wisdom, stature of the Lord, favor with God and man, and they were going to do that in a non-government school way, and it was going to cost them, and they realized that, and they still did it. Now, of course, depending on which portion of the histories you would like to read, what the different culture of the school may have been. There's going to be the attack, the perhaps historically accurate in certain subsections of the Christian education movement, white flight, as it was called. I heartily disagree, and it has not been proven to me that across the entire and even the majority of the spectrum of Christian education, that was truly the motivation for the starting of Christian schools. And again, I'm not going to say it wasn't in part for certain, but for those who paint with such a broad brushstroke, I would have issues as a critical academic, as just a person of logic and sense. I would say your every is not going to sway me. I really don't think that this was the case for each of these institutions. I firmly believe it wasn't for many. We fast forward a little bit, we see, for whatever reason, another burst of growth in the 80s. Perhaps it's a reaction to the 70s. We could go into a million different reasons why whatever the case was, the case it was. And then we crawl forward. We're looking at Christian education being, we want to say as mainstream as it ever was. Schools around us, schools like Faith Baptist School in their 40th, closer to 50th years. There's plenty of schools around that have lasted that long. And really, schools that began more recently are probably schools which began quite a bit more recently, as in 20 teens and further. And I'm painting with broad brushstrokes myself, but first of all, it's early in the morning. Second of all, I'm not trying to write a book right now. I'm trying to evidence that there are certain epochs in the history of the thing, and why would we be having school growth right now, as we heard, because of school choice. School choice is bigger than it's ever been in the United States of America, and school choice is the Southern Baptist Convention at this point, probably 5 or 6 years ago, put out a report calling on its members that didn't have schools to start schools because now is the time for it. And this is the crazy time of COVID, even just after. And so that's where we are now. We are seeing an initiative across state associations, and because of the opportunity for school choice around, even hearing from Jeff Walton about accreditation and needing to have alternative paths for Christian schools to come on to an accreditation pathway so they can receive the funds they would need to stand up against their neighbors. Stand up against, not to make it negative, but to play ball in the same neighborhood with their neighbors anyway, to be relevant, to have an opportunity to receive those funds that would be rightfully due to them. Very interesting times. But in this, there's the life of the associations out there. Now, we've been in contact, have spoken at, have represented the Christian Principles podcast at the Mid-Atlantic Christian School Association. We've heard the story told there by Bill of the Mid-Atlantic being the birthplace of what became ACSI, actually, after there was a bit of a rift and a move out west. We know that there is a history of, we can say, conservative Baptist churches coming together, and largely Baptist and Bible churches coming together to start the American Association of Christian Schools. 8 different states that came together saying we need a national entity, and now there's 37. We were told this morning 37 state and regional associations that make up the American Association of Christian Schools. There's the Christian Schools International. I actually don't know their history that well, but they exist. There's American Classical Christian School Association. There are a number of different associations. They each would have a piece of the market. They each would have a mission alignment, perhaps a statement of faith alignment. And the one, of course, that we grew up in and knew would be the American Association of Christian Schools, and both the Keystone Christian Education Association, which is no longer with AACS and the Maryland Association of Christian Schools, which was and then wasn't, now back is again. And and AACS has its middle states reciprocity with its accreditation status, but it largely stands on its own as far as its lobbying activities in Washington, D.C. and whatnot. So there are so many more discussions to be had. There's even an Oral Roberts Christian School Association out there somewhere, I believe. All kinds of fun stuff we can get into, and state associations. And as we've seen today, as we saw today and yesterday, there are Christian education networks and coalitions and associations that they are not under any national affiliation. In fact, national affiliations advertise with that state association. So all of these things, there's plenty of opportunities for Christian schools of multiple denominations to become involved with a state association, and we encourage it. You hear me say that. We very much do encourage that. We've had discussions with Brad Parker about the benefits of joining a state and a national association. We actually, upcoming, will probably go over a very specific association's benefits. We have talked extensively about a couple of these different associations and our interactions with them. We find them to be greatly valuable. All right, I've droned on enough. There's a little bit of our general knowledge of the landscape, and there's more, and I'm leaving things out, and I'm again painting with broad brushstrokes, but this is where we are. This is a general understanding, and that even the fact for some of you didn't realize that there are so many associations, and there's more out there for Christian schools to get involved with, and there's private school associations. Today we had private school associations with us that represented more like a CAPE feel. The CAPE, I believe it's Council for American Private Education, and they have different state affiliates, and there's one in Maryland as well, and they would be considered partners in many ways, and certain of the political reasons we would go to advocate in Annapolis anyway. So there's some landscape. Matt, what was it that we heard? Who did we hear it from that prompted this episode?
Well, I didn't think you were going to put me on the spot to remember who said it.
Well, I can describe the guy. I don't remember his name, though, which is bad, but I do know it was the Iowa Association of Christian Schools paid lobbyist. He has multiple clients, but he wore two brightly colored untucked shirts, like untuck it shirts that have a flat bottom, and they don't look, they don't quite look like the big scalloped Oxford untucked shirts. And so I will remember that when I come back to this association meeting, and remember the hosts came in with untucked shirts on, and I will probably be untucked with flip-flops on. But that's beside the point. He was presenting along with his peers from the Iowa Association of Christian School. Actually, no, they weren't. It was Troy from the Christian Education Association Network of Ohio, and it was a gentleman from Arizona's Christian Education Network, and then off to the right was this gentleman, which I do not remember his name, but he's a lobbyist, a paid lobbyist who I'm sure has taken the course on ethics, and he's registered with the state there in Iowa. But what was it he said? What was it that he pointed out and with energy made a claim about?
Yeah. So in discussion, I feel like the context of, in the discussion of the upcoming education tax credit and understanding lobbying efforts and making sure that state legislatures aren't messing things up, I guess I'm simplifying it, but in noting about the coming together with groups of mutual interest and getting things accomplished that benefit us. The statement was made that this idea of, I'm going to butcher it, but the idea of, well, we've been saying tribalism. That's the word that's stuck in my head right now. I don't think that's the word he used.
No, it was. That was why. Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was the word he used. But this idea of tribalism, where he said emphatically, just needs to stop.
Yeah.
Stop it. It needs to be dead.
It needs to end. Tribalism is over. It needs to be over.
That we've come to a place where we understand where we stand spiritually, doctrinally. We understand where others stand spiritually, doctrinally. But when it comes to achieving a goal that is mutually beneficial, are you going to allow those lines of division, which we're going to say, and he would also say, are absolutely understood, necessary, but not to the point of, in some ways, I would say, suffocating your cause.
Okay, yeah. I like that.
We don't have to tread the water on our own. we have opportunities to have teammates in these efforts. And we've seen this happen time and time again. And yet the general mantra, even when, Mark's talking through the history, a lot of that history was, we don't associate with this church, this school, this ministry,
this college.
this college.
Because you do, we don't. Yeah.
We don't associate with them because of X, Y, and Z. Therefore, anything they do, we won't have anything to do with it.
Anathema.
Which, I again, understand. I'm not going to worship the way they're worshiping. I'm not going to, engage in things that they're engaging in. But when a bill is being passed in your state assembly that is going to harm not just your ministry, but also their ministry, you better go arm in arm together.
And that's
to shoot that thing down.
That's our simple thesis for this topic. We've discussed it and we agree.
Yeah.
We are in general agreement here on the Christian Principles podcast that we don't see the demanded separatism. I want to use that carefully because I know separatists is going to be a buzzword for them. We don't see the demanded separatism when it comes to a political end.
Yes.
We really don't. There are associations who deem taking any license from the state to be entirely problematic because in that accepting of a letter of compliance, of a license, of anything that the state grants, you are saying the state gives me this power rather than the church or God, which ultimately the church is God, so that the God gave me this power to educate our children. And I do not disrespect that. I wonder how far that goes.
Yeah.
I do. I really do wonder how far that goes, because does this mean that you would leave a state that demanded that, okay, we don't care what school you want to be, you will register with the state.
Yeah.
So you would never live in that state, and you would also say that any church or Christian that does live in that state is doing so problematically, which that's fine to say. You can have those lines, but there is a measure of just logical, how does this play out? First of all, again, for the school, but then let's go back and be more basic. And I'll point to personal earlier in life experience. So, I'm not talking about the mentors I have now or the people that I are part of the Maryland Association of Christian Schools now. I'm talking about much earlier in life. And I would hear preachers make comments early on that were about a certain politician. Maybe one of my earliest memories would be to I was supposed to hate Bill Clinton because of Bill Clinton's lewdness and his immorality. And I'm not saying we're supposed to hate anybody, but I was, he was one I remember being spoken of as all the reasons why you would never vote blue, so on and so forth. So I do remember those things. And now I look back on that, I say those same discussions of who you shouldn't vote for from those leaders, well, that logically means that they did have, in this case, obviously, they did have the Republican mindset. We are going to vote Republican, which means they are partnering with anybody else who is Republican to get a political, to go about a political,
right,
to reach a political end.
Right.
So those same leaders that would get up and put on blast Bill Clinton and the Democrats would then turn and, celebrate the Republican cause. And I'm not saying right or wrong, just saying that's what would occur.
Yeah.
And then, but again, at the same time, go and say, and we're not going to talk about them across town because they wear pants, or we're not going to engage with so-and-so because of a musical style. And often, of course, the term, the verse, be not unequally yoked, comes together. And I'm not going to go into a biblical determination right now of that matter. If you want to go for it, we want to go into that, be my guest and go further into it. I'm not going to take that path because I don't happen to really believe that has anywhere near as much to do with political stances and anywhere near as much to do with the sort of better for conservatives in general, better for biblical valuists in general, that it has been stretched to mean in my life.
Yeah, the be not unequally yoked is often being stretched or brought out of context because that is speaking of a lifelong commitment in marriage, which is not what we're talking about. And again, I think it's also important to just reiterate, we're not saying that lines of separation are not important, or boundaries are not important.
Absolutely.
We're saying in the element of a political force, political coalition, I believe there can also be, in many ways, biblical support in that. I often think about in those things you're talking about, preaching against Bill Clinton and whatnot, like that kind of rhetoric, I think we could say it that way, is too eerily close. No, okay. It's too early in the morning. It is too eerily similar to Pharisaical practices in that, this holier than thou, the way we are following scripture is, and by all means, there comes a point in time where it's like, no, this is what scripture says.
You're going to take
we
a
need to stand up and do it. So it's really hard to delineate, but I hope you can see what I'm saying, where Jesus is condemned by the Pharisees for entering into a publican's house and eating with him, or spending time with sinners and people that were unclean. Like, obviously Jesus was not seeking, a coalition, but what was his ultimate purpose was, I'm not willing that any should perish, that all should come to repentance. And, in many ways, he's communicating that these individuals who otherwise wouldn't really have had access, their hearts are in a place to receive me, whereas those who should be aware and should see the need are blinded by their hypocrisy, their spiritual eliteness. And that's where I go back to that idea of suffocating ourselves, in the sense that, here's something that's really bad that's coming in for legislation or whatever that could really harm our school. But look, the Catholics are really going strong with this. I don't really want to be associated with Catholics or the Muslims.
Yeah. In Maryland, we have the case of the Muslim families standing up just as strongly as the Christian families in Prince George's, Montgomery County, and winning $6 million because they stood up against the idiocy of the transgender discussion. They didn't want their kids in it.
But to completely avoid any effort to try to work together in that is rather foolish, and it doesn't.
I don't think it's being a good steward.
No, it's not being a good steward. And I mean, this even goes to the level of, and I think it was brought up, I don't know if the same guy from Iowa brought it up or not, but, are we as Christian school leaders encouraging our students to go into politics? And I think we again, I want to be really careful, because I think it really ought to, it behooves us as Christian school educators to be pushing ministry first.
Sure.
And, even education first. But when it comes to politics, we somehow get this idea of, if they go into politics, they're going to compromise. They're not going to be able to be strong. They're going to be attacked. They're not going to get anywhere. They're not going to get any votes. Like, we just completely forget that we serve God, who, in a very feeble message by a man who resisted God's calling, converted an entire wicked city of Nineveh with just one simple message. And it took one guy.
Yeah.
So, even that, like, we can't expect change. We can't expect good things to happen in our government if we're not arming ourselves with co-laborers that have a mutual interest in fighting this good fight, or putting people in place that can also just get things done.
Just the screaming logic of it right now. When I'll pick on the Maryland Association of Christian Schools. When the Maryland Association of Christian Schools right now goes and advocates, who is it going and advocating with? It's going and advocating with Republican legislators in the state house.
Yeah.
And it's putting its faith in certain ways in the individuals who are not align with. We're going to have Senator Mary Beth Groza come and be a part of the Faith at the School first day of school.
Well, hopefully by this point she already came.
She probably already came by this point. That's true. but either way, she's coming. She is a practicing Catholic. We have openly stated on this show that when we refer to Christian education, we don't refer to Catholic education. We openly made that claim that we refer to Christian education as the mainline Protestant denominations and their statements of faith concerning the Bible and theology. So even this podcast has pointed out where our lines would be, and I don't begrudge the Amish for not being involved in the government and whatnot else. That's fine. You're listening to us, and we're providing opinion. This is where we are on the general the range, the scale, the possibilities. This is where we stand on it. We agree that this tribalism is not only not helpful, but arguably wrong in the area of political governmental advocacy. Yes, we can do that as an association, and we should be doing that as an association. And hopefully, your associations and your school does. You should be doing that for your school. We were one of the crazy. We're talking about these large associations dealing with, in some ways, millions of dollars. But you know what they need? They need videos from your school of your parents doing individual, isolated, small, family level things. That's what they need. Because that's who they're talking to about that when they come up, when they go to the representatives. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah,
are the granular level. That's what they're talking about. So being advocates for yourself, please do invite those legislators to your schools. Please do have them come in and be knowledgeable. Blue, red, purple, doesn't matter. Bring them into your schools. Be a gospel light to them. Do it. Go bring them in. And as you bring them in, realize you're partnering with them in some way, shape, or form. We were talking previous about how the Milwaukee Christian schools, even amongst the Democrats that come out of Milwaukee as candidates for whatever else, they appreciate and they are advocates for school choice. So there are Christian schools that would be advocates for a certain, in almost all other spheres, not going to be backing a Democratic candidate, but in this way, there would be Democrats they would agree with in this issue, and perhaps and provide more information on and bring into their school. I don't know what they would do with that, but in any case, just the uniqueness of different parts of America, the uniquenesses of different schools, to just continue to beat this horse that is dead in front of us. We are not saying don't have a theological stance. We are saying, as was made the point earlier, the tribalism, the siloing of that information, which that's a little bit different, but still the image helps out a lot here, that it's not big versus little. It's not you versus them. It's not CSI versus ACCS versus AACS versus ACSI versus, you keep naming them as we named them earlier. Like that's not what this is. In that room, what you heard over and over again was, when we come together, we're stronger. Even in the room were represented what would be secularly based private schools associations that were made up of mainline Christian denominations, Catholics, Lutherans, and private schools that were just secular private schools. And they were represented there as well because they had very significant Christian populations in them. Again, by no means are we calling on the theology of those schools to change because of who they're partnering with. But in every sense, when a coalition is able to go before the state and say, we are 1 million strong, and we hold in this way the same value, let's pick on transgenderism, we hold in this way the same value that children should not be mutilated in this state. I'm going to link arms over that. I am. I may not go to a stage and pray with them.
Yeah.
But that's not what the political scene calls for at the moment. That's not what it calls for. I very well may go and march with. How many people have wanted to join the March for Life in D.C.? I'm sure some of you listeners have. You've gone. I want to go. I haven't been I have not yet gone to the March for Life. It's kind of a tough time for, an educator to go outside of bringing students. And recently, parents haven't necessarily wanted their students to go because of, the violence and the danger of being in DC, perhaps. But in any case, I want to go to that. And I know there's others who have, our listeners who have gone to the March for Life or other March for Life around the country. Those are not made up of, whatever your stripe of
Right.
biblical
Yeah.
Christianity is.
They're
It's
all
not just
stripes.
all you. It's not just all you from your church. It's from all stripes.
Yeah.
All stripes and secularists who are not. In the greater March for Life, there are more than likely there are probably even either agnostics or deists, or perhaps even there are some who are anti-God, but they would consider themselves pro-life because they do believe life begins at conception.
Yeah.
And that's not outside the realm to believe that that's the possibility at all. And so we're just going to not do those marches, not take those stances. It doesn't jive. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
And that's where we are.
I would say just two more things. And I know this episode's long, so we're gonna wrap it up. But
sorry, you need it. You need it tonight.
Two more things that I was thinking about throughout this time, and I'll start with a simple one. That this is not limited to state and federal governments. We need to remember also our local governments and communities.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where maybe it's the hardest. But if we even maybe started there, like just by start by asking, like going around, just taking a survey in your community. Do you know about Faith Baptist School? What do you think about Faith Baptist School? And, your ministry has a reputation in your community, whether it's good or who.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, how are we reaching the mission of reaching our Jerusalem or Judea and Samaria? It's got to start at home. So I don't want us to overlook that even in our communities, I know I was a part of for a while, and they keep picking meeting times that are just impossible for me, especially when I have a teaching schedule as well as administrative, but an emergency preparedness group of private schools in our area. And yeah, it's all the private schools. So not going to be ones of our stripe, but it was an extremely valuable group to be a part of.
How many of you would turn that down just because, there's going to be a prep school in there.
Yeah.
There's going to be a Jewish school in there. There's going to be a Catholic school. How many of you would turn that down? I'm imagining most of our listeners would not turn the opportunity down to be in a community awareness. Well, you're going to have to really go a long way to prove to me that it's okay in that situation, but it's not okay to partner with them when it comes to the right to life or to end child mutilation and transgender surgeries. One's about safety, and just because it's local, it's okay.
So we need to think about that. Sense. We need to act on that. And then the last thing that I would say, earlier this year, I had the opportunity to go to the Maryland State Summit that put on by Herzog once again.
You're
very blessed to do that in Baltimore, where Maryland state leaders were coming together, administrators, heads of associations and whatnot. And, thankful to have a lot of my colleagues from the Maryland Association of Christian Schools that went to that. And there were several others in the room, and I think I even mentioned this on the podcast at one point, but, the room maybe had 20 people in it. And at one point, the statement was made, we live in a state that is not friendly to us. And it's not going to be easy for us to get anything done in our favor. But if we ever expect anything to happen, and this is what I keep thinking about this phrase, there has to be more people in the room. And that's what we're saying in this podcast. Not just that we need to get more people. Are we even in the room? We need to put ourselves in the room and then work really hard. And I think there are some states that are doing incredibly well with this and are shining testimony to the rest of the states. But we need to come together, and who knows, maybe there are times coming where we can stand together as a community and start seeing safeguards put in place to allow us to continue. I just celebrated the 50th anniversary with my alma mater that I graduated from. And, one of the things that has to be said at a celebration like that is, here's to another 50 years. But that next 50 years is only going to be guaranteed if the government allows it to continue.
Yeah, quite literally. I have a thought concerning, again, my upbringing, which I'm not calling every person who was a part of my early life some kind of, horrible example or whatnot. That's not the point of this. In fact, I've probably retained far more than I've not retained from growing up as I did and where I was and so on and so forth. But so often associations, churches, schools, leaders, because it all comes back to it, especially strong leaders, made what they were not or who they were against or what they were against their calling card, so much rather than what they were for. And I've lived long enough now in Christian education, as slight as my years are in it and as green as I am in it, I can personally bear witness to an organization that was born out of the anti-message. So we are not XYZ, and therefore we should exist because we are not XYZ. And the continuation of that message lasted for as long as the pastors and administrators who retained that message lasted. And in schools, we know that the length of an administrator, on average, public and private, is like 4 years. So it didn't take long for the organization to have serious turnover and even pastoral turnover, enough so that the educational organization largely lost enough members of its body that it disintegrated. Or when this message was so much what was not, who they were against, that doesn't bear well over time. And over time, the angst that leader has, especially angst which you really can't trace back to the Bible, which again, I do want to make a big point about that tonight, and we have, so I won't continue, but when that angst is traced back to the proclivities of a man and not to, Matthew 5:8 or John 3:16 or whatever else, what other passage it happens to be in, that's a very difficult place to set up any real tent and say, as Matt said earlier, this is the hill I'm going to die on. This is the hill this association is going to die on, separation. With that being said, we've talked about the vehement statement made yesterday. There must be an end to this tribalism in Christian education associations. And we're standing here saying, as we've explained it, we agree.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our Christian Administrator Spotlight. Matt, who gets the Christian Administrator Spotlight at the end of this significant episode?
All right, for our spotlight in this episode, we're going back to Emmanuel Christian School in Wabash, Indiana, and spotlighting the assistant principal, Heather Daniel.
Heather, I'm going to pray for you now, okay? God in heaven, you are good to us. We appreciate your word. We pray that we rightly divide it, carefully studying it. And please may we give grace to those around us who carefully study it and divide it a different way than we do. We know it's not of private interpretation. We know that we will be held accountable someday. But we are thankful for your grace. And as Heather goes about doing exactly that with her administrative team, and even on the local level, as she goes about trying to move through what is the blessed opportunity she has to help guide students through obligations and rules and expectations, which are not always exactly out of the Bible, but rather stem from or are principles derived from or are just what needs to be done to keep things decently in order. In all those ways, give her the grace she needs to take Emmanuel as far as it can go for you. May she be your hands and feet. We thank you for her and the ministry there. We ask all this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, guys, it's time to go. Thanks for growing with us today.
We want to thank you for listening. We're honored that you spend this time with us each week. Our heart is to bring you practical conversations and resources that really serve you as a Christian school leader. One of the best ways you can help us spread the word is by leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with other Christian school principals you're connected with. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Join the conversation and share any posts that resonate with you. Every share makes a difference in helping more leaders find encouragement and practical tools. And remember, the podcast is just one way we help. We also love serving schools through speaking and workshops. Our keynotes and sessions are designed to give you actionable strategies you can take back to your team and implement right away. If you'd like more details, just send us an email at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com. We'd love to connect. Until next time, thanks for joining us on the Christian Principles Podcast.